the security dialogue.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You are welcome to yet another edition of the Security Dialogue on Muslim Television Ahmadiyya International. In our previous discussions, we've delved into a lot of issues, and we did something on terrorism, money laundering, and all of that. Today, we are going to look at drug trafficking and violent extremism, its impact on national security, both in Ghana and across the sub-region. Now, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, that is UNODC, transnational organized crime, including drug trafficking, synonymous to the activities of violent extremist groups, generate 1.5 trillion in global profit every year, and many of the most trafficking routes are in Africa. Today, with me in studio to discuss this very important subject is two distinguished personality. Though they have been on this program, this is another dimension that they bring their expertise to bear. I have Mr. Mukhtar Mumuni, who is the Executive Director for the West African Center for Violent Extremism, WASI for short. And then again, I have Mr. Adib Sani, who is the Executive Director for the Jatike Center for Human Security and Peace Building. Gentlemen, you are welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
It's been a while.
Thank you. Sure.
I mean, it looks like your chicks are coming. I mean,
Really?
the morning is flowing, right?
That's not good then.
But in Africa, when your stomach is coming, your chicks are coming, then we know that
It's not good.
The morning is flowing.
I need to do some work then. It is true. Yeah.
Adib, how is it?
Alhamdulillah.
I mean, the last time we talked about money laundering, terrorism, and all of that. But today we want to look at issues around drug trafficking and then violent extremism. I think they work hand in hand. And then my brother Mukhtar has been a lot of work on this, and including yourself. So, but then when we want to talk about drug trafficking, I think in terminology forms we need to understand what it is about. And I will want to start with you, Mukhtar, on this.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here in this very, very impressive studio. And I always get very excited when I come in here and see the imposing, impressive, the studio that you have. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Yes, drug trafficking, it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem globally. It's a huge problem here in West Africa. And it's a big problem here for Ghana. For a long time, it has been, a transit point for international drug traffickers. In many ways, and at different points in time, it has served also as a destination for drug traffickers. And if you look at trends happening within Africa in terms of violent extremism, this has become a part of the mix in dealing with violent extremism here. And using drug trafficking, the illicit movement of drugs. And drugs, it's a composite word. It consists of so many variations and iterations and different forms of drugs here. But in this discussion, I would limit to the very common and popular ones associated with violent extremism.
Okay.
And so it has become very synonymous. It's become inherently linked to violent extremism in West Africa and the north of Africa amongst extremist groups. Yeah. And this has been a challenge in dealing with the menace of violent extremism in Africa. And the document or the statistics you just pointed to by the UNODC, UN Office for Drugs and Crime, it consistently has been updating globally, updating people about the menace and the statistics, and it's been very alarming. There is any point. It hasn't been any point where we've seen a decline in the feature of drugs and this challenge of violent extremism here. Yeah. And to lay it bare, I'm sure we'll come to specifics regarding this. Sure. Violent extremism thrives on so many things. Okay. It's evolved from very simplistic tools in terms of approach to exacting violence on populations to very sophisticated means of engaging state actors in this trade of violence. And so it required huge financing to continue to engage in attacks against states. Okay. And so they're looking for opportunistic situations to make money. Mm-hmm. And so you would see a very regular feature or issue, relating to these attackers. Okay. They take over police stations, mm-hmm. and get, opportunity to take the weapons and any cache of weapons in there, sell them, or take them, to include in their stock of weapons to engage state actors. Okay. They are engaged in kidnapping. Kidnapping for ransom also has been part of it. You see in situations where they impose levies on some communities that they take control over. The territorial, space is under the control of some extremists. And so they impose some form of local tax on them to be able to mop up funding, okay. to operate. And it's a very, very common feature of all organized crime groups all over the world. Among Italian mafia, I remember I did some work with anti-mafia prosecutors in Sicily, in Italy, yeah. where mafia crimes are very pervasive. In anti-mafia work, we call it PISO. Okay. PISO means protection money, okay. For these mafia groups. And a significant proportion of businesses all over in southern Italy and Sicily, they pay this protection money to mafia groups to continue to, to exist. Okay. In West Africa, many parts of, there's a region, the epicenter of violent extremism today in West Africa is located around a region called the Liptako-Gruma region. Okay. It's a border region, shared by 3 countries: northern part of Burkina Faso, the southern part of, Mali, the southern part of Niger. Okay. And so it's a trilogy of, in terms of location. So this
and more or less becomes like some of the typology as we were discussing about when it comes to crime. So it's like that is where it's really emanates from.
Yes, okay. It's linked to that. And so these things happen there a lot. And because of, in these places, there's a feature or phenomenon we call the absence of the states, ungoverned spaces that allows this, trafficking routes to continue to exist.
Okay, so I want you to hold it here for me. I want to take Adib's reaction when it comes to issues of drug trafficking, linked with violent extremism in Africa?
Well, obviously, for violent extremism to thrive, there should be blood flow. Okay. They should have some resource capabilities. And usually what they do, very much I agree with my brother Mukhtar, is to engage in this business to be able to raise enough capital to engage in other activities, such as the buying of weapons. And it's a global menace. The last time I appeared here, I spoke about the Sinaloa drug cartel. What they do is they sell the drugs beyond the Mexican border, and they're able to devise different means to transport these weapons, either by catapulting the drugs into the US, or even putting together makeshift or homemade submarines. And when they get these monies, even though some of them find their ways back into Mexico, but a lot of it goes into the purchase of weapons. The Taliban, they appear to be very rich because they engage in the cultivation and sale of opium, and there's a thriving market for it in that area. So always they have the financial muscle to be able to advance their cause. And in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a sophisticated network of state, non-state, sub-state actors who are involved in these drug business to fund either terror activities or other activities. Guinea-Bissau has been described as the hub of the cocaine trade in sub-Africa, in sub-Saharan
Ghana
Africa.
Is immune to all of this?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Before we started this program, we spoke about the MV Benjamin's cocaine that mysteriously got missing.
I had the opportunity to perform guard duties after the arrest at the Chamahabo.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Where
That's,
Kofi Bachi cut his
Yes.
teeth. Very popular.
you know,
Yeah.
not too long ago, there was another incident somewhere in the Volta region where the cleaner allegedly swept the cocaine away.
Yeah.
I mean, Ghana is an interesting country.
Ridiculous stories.
Very interesting, because that is the exhibition room. That is where you are supposed to check to find out whether indeed it is cocaine or not. There's no CCTV camera there. So after subjecting the substance to whatever they did, they left it, and the cleaner also came and swept it away. How interesting.
Did that really happen?
I mean, that's the story we were given. I mean, you know, before I even came to the studio, I was reading a story on one of the news portals that spoke about the tree planting exercise that we expended about $13 million. And they said they bought 5 million so and so seeds. So if you like, go and uproot and count the seeds. It's as simple as that. You know?
That is very interesting.
It's quite, I mean, interesting but disturbing as well.
Yeah.
And it is important we put certain strategies in place so we are able to counter this.
Definitely we'll come to that strategy. But moving into specifics, and I mean, like you made mention of that trial angle of operation and all of that. We are talking about drugs. What kind of drugs are we talking about? I mean, Adib has mentioned, for instance, opium and all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the ordinary person also want to know, what kind of drugs are you talking? Is it is it a paracetamol? Because sometimes people mistakenly, when they are going to buy medicine, say, I'm going to buy drugs. And, is it paracetamol or is
So the drugs are many, and of course, cocaine at some point was a big thing, was a big feature among these groups. But over time, in the last 8 to 10 years, increasingly, you know, there's a drug we call capthagon, and it belongs to the family of the tramadol, including tramadol. The opioids or opioids, we call it. And so there are other different variations of it. But if you take tramadol, for instance, it's a very, very popular and well sought after drug among extremists.
Why?
One, it is very, very well sought after amongst them, and so it's good business. And so they sell it to make money, to finance their activities. And in financing their activities, it's not just operational activities, but also for recruitment. There are many parts of Northern Africa, including somewhere even in Cameroon, Niger, Chad, extremist groups are recruiting young, vulnerable people and paying them up to $500, right? And so they need constant flow of funding to be able to do that. They give them $500, they give them a motorbike, and they can get them a gun. You know, he's ready to battle. You need money to continue to do that. Beyond that, tramadol is a very effective drug to subdue pain, ensure endurance, to withstand, you know, the difficulties involved in this all-important task, battle, you know, in the name of God. So they need that. It helps them to stay longer at night without sleep. You can stay a long time without sleeping. It actually exaggerates your capacity. We've been seeing several videos locally here of someone under tramadol trying to put a whole tricycle into a small sack because, you know, or thinking that he can actually uproot any tree, any building. You know, it amplifies and exaggerates your capabilities. And so it's a very, very popular and well sought after drug amongst them. Within the European context, in Syria, I mean, you know, in the Gulf region where these problems exist, in Iraq and Syria, in Northern Africa, they call it, you know, in literature, they call it the jihad pill. It's the jihad pill that everyone must have because it's what can keep you actively engaged. And so it's a very popular thing. You know, it's more popular than we're seeing here, I mean, along coastal states, including Ghana. And so it's one of the single biggest things that, you know, they continue to use in their operations. And all the other variations, they perform a similar task for them. And mind you, we're talking about financing, and as well as your operational capacity to continue to engage And so it is the single biggest, drug used in this.
Yeah, so linking it to the violent extremist activities that we talked about, of course, when somebody is high on this, sometimes what hitherto they will not use violence to acquire, they will want to use violence to acquire because they are not getting it. I mean, someone will say that looking at the scarce nature of our resources and its distribution, then youth will want to use that kind of force. But I mean, typical of what we used to say, that if you want to tell maybe somebody nonsense or insult your in-law, you have to go and take probably alcohol so that you get your eye dazed, and then you can now tell the person anything that you want to. I want to, as we talk about drugs, I want us to link it to the violent extremism, its impact, the impact it has when we talk about security. Because on the security dialogue, we want to understand all the dimensions that affect the core of our national security. So how does this impact on national security?
First of all, there are several angles to it in terms of the connection and impact. These drugs, they help finance the activities of extremist groups.
Okay.
It's a big source of income, a cash and very easy, ready market for them. And so the cash helps them to recruit new members, to continue to make up their legion of fighters. It helps them to fund their operational activities. You need to be able to buy chemicals, buy fertilizers and other things to make what we call improvised explosive devices and pieces of equipment that you can use to set up what we call booby traps. Booby traps to, against your enemies. So you need funding to continue to do that. And this is a cheap and easy source of regular income for them. At the same time, it helps them to amplify, their operational capacity in terms of their legion of fighters. They will continue because they know what tramadol can do for them in terms of enhancing their, their ability to act and numbing their pain and ensuring longer endurance. It takes away the fear and engaging.
So they're able to cause small harm to society.
Exactly. At the same time, it helps in terms of the propaganda tool in seeking to recruit. Okay. So if you find a very vulnerable individual you're seeking to radicalize, there's a point where this will come in. Look, this can help you do this. It can help ensure longer endurance. It can numb your pain. I mean, so all this is part of the propaganda that can help entice younger people to quickly join their fold of fighters. Okay. And so it's a big thing that connects, that inherently is a part of the mix that increases the incidences of violent extremism in this space. And in West Africa, if you continue to follow the updates from the UNODC, you would see that it's a continuous worry that's shared by the organization because it's continuing to be a big feature among extremist groups within West Africa.
So at the
let me add something. Yeah. There's historically, I mean, based on historical antecedents, there's always a relationship between drug use and violence or conflicts. Even during the Second World War, German scientists were asked to work on drugs that would, improve the efficiency of their soldiers. I mean, they came out with different drugs, and even at the height of the Vietnam War, between 1965 and 75, I mean, there were situations where the Central Command had to move, drugs to some of the soldiers just to keep them, even though this is not widely.
So it means that there are some positive dimensions.
No, there's absolutely no positive dimension when it comes to.
The point is about the regular feature of drugs in engaging in battles or in wars and in belligerent actions. There's that feature. I mean, when you come to the traditional context in West Africa, groups engaging in battles go look for charms and things that can enhance their capacity, to subdue the enemy. So all these are part of the war preparation and the mix of tools and equipment, to engage.
Even domestic criminals, excuse me, armed robbers. I mean, before they go on their operations, I mean, mostly they are on drugs, so they are high, and their adrenaline level is at an all-time high, so they are capable of doing anything.
Yeah, so if I listen to the conversation we were having, then it means that the most vulnerable group in all of this is the youth.
Sure, I mean, there's the youth. I mean, across the board.
Yeah, but
youth are very, among the extremist groups,
okay.
youth are, I mean, they make up the majority of people fighting for extremist groups. You know, people under 30 years of age are largely the people who are used in the battlefront, using explosive devices strapped on them in terms of suicide bombs.
So,
and for a fact, these suicide bombers, including now a very regular feature of girls, young girls, they all take this, so-called jihad pills, and psych them to think that this will not, you won't feel any pain in detonating these explosive devices. So young people are very, very vulnerable category.
Now, Mr. Adib, how do we, and we'll be wrapping up on this very first session of this very discussion, and then we'll do the concluding part, so that we can get a full appreciation of the topic that we are discussing. But I want to know what are some of the preventive measures, because eventually it has a very direct and indirect consequences on national security, especially the youth are being used and they perpetrate those kind of crimes, maybe armed robbery and the rest of, and all of that. What should be the preventive measures in this?
Well, this issue is not just peculiar to Africa. It is a major issue even in the US.
Okay.
At the point, they said they were in an opioid epidemic of some sort. And just recently, I think some lawsuits were filed against some pharmaceutical firms in the hundreds of millions of dollars for their inability to control the flow of these opioids. So accountability is key. However, when you come to this part of the world, it is a different story altogether. But that notwithstanding, it is still important, it is still imperative that we invest in building institutional capacity to be able to deal with the scourge. Legislations should also be promulgated. Just recently, I went to a pharmacy to buy antibacterial. And then under normal circumstances, you're supposed to come with a prescription.
Okay.
Unfortunately, nobody asks for a prescription. So if we are able to come up with legislation so people just don't walk up to pharmacies and buy the morphines and the tramals is extremely key. I mean, the last time I had my surgery, I was prescribed the tramadol, and just to ease the pain. All right, it started with the morphine, but at the point the doctor said, no, you can get addicted, okay? So they prescribed the tramadol. But when I tried it 1, 2, maximum twice, I stopped and endured the pain because I know the dangers involved. So we really need to build that institutional capacity, and most importantly also the borders. The border security is key because sometimes some of these labs with these chemicals are even manufactured. They are even manufactured at the very domestic level. In one country, then they are transported into another country, so it falls into the hands of these criminal elements.
And to Mr. Mutaru, for instance, if you look at the recent occurrences in South Africa, in Nigeria, I think Lekki, thereabout, and all of that, or some of the violent extremist movements or activities that happen with this looting and all those kind of this. Would you attribute some of these activities in a more religious connotation?
Absolutely not. It's more than just religion. Religion plays a small part of why these things are happening.
Okay.
And even added to the challenge of violent extremism across West Africa, I've also categorized and generalized that what we're seeing, like in South Africa, in Nigeria, in many parts of even in Mali, and many, protests that are happening against states, and a lot of them falling or succumbing to the threat of violent extremism. It's a product or is a manifestation of the, and frustration of young people, especially, who have lost faith in their state's capacity to provide them opportunities, for economic participation, what we often call the entitlements of citizenship. Okay. And so these things would drive people to act in the way we saw happen in South Africa, we saw happen in Nigeria, and many parts within West Africa. And so religion plays a very small part of that, but in that particular context. But in the context of West Africa, specific to violent extremism, religion plays a role, because these are a product of what we call radicalization. It's a process where individuals grow over a period of time and come to a point where they see violence as a legitimate way to express themselves. Exactly. And religion often plays a role. Negative religious ideologies or political ideologies, frustration with the system, marginalization, poverty, inequality, unemployment, all these things come together and lead the individual to a point where he sees violence as a legitimate way to register the person's grievances. So it's a complete mix of things that come together. But to add to the point about what can we do, it's a huge challenge. It's a huge challenge globally. But for us, we have seen a deterioration in terms of the transnational organized crime networks. And there's been a deterioration in that. Because when you see, if you go back few years back, after the implosion of Tunisia, the Arab Spring, we saw addition of illicit networks, opening up of new criminal networks amongst these groups, followed by the collapse of Libya. It made it easy for trade in illicit activities across the borders within the Sahel. And the Sahel today, it's a big mess. Yes. And the challenge is that it's moving and descending towards coastal states like Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, and Togo. And so this is a big problem we need to fix. We'll fix by fixing the borders, as they mentioned. There's a lot of what we call ungoverned spaces, like I was talking about the northern border in Burkina Faso. Ungoverned spaces in terms of state presence, official presence, as well as development and security. This allows these organized criminal networks to take over these territories and continue to ply their trade. And so we need to be able to fix those to be able to turn the tide of these illicit drugs that finance and amplify the incidence of violent extremism.
Thank you. Thank you so much, viewers out there. This has been another wonderful segment of the Security Dialogue on Muslim Television and Media International. But like I indicated earlier, we're going to bring you the concluding part of this very segment, because our experts have so much to share with us and also to guide us on how we can prevent some of these occurrences. With me here in the studio has been Mr. Mutaru Mumuni, who is the Executive Director of the West African Center for Counter Extremism. And then also Mr. Adib Sani, who is the Executive Director for the Jatike Center for Human Security and Peace Building. I have been your host, Sadiq Educhum, on the Security Dialogue. We'll be back with you same time next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.